I used to count my worth in tips. $4 from table 7. 10 from the couple by the window. Nothing from the guys who snapped their fingers instead of using words. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. At 23, I knew every sound a diner could make. The hiss of the grill. The clink of chipped coffee mugs. The low hum of worn-out ceiling fans that never turned off. I could balance 3 plates and a pot of coffee like it was ballet. And yet, somehow, all of it, my work, my drive, my dreams, meant nothing to Landon McHale. "You're smart, but let's be honest," he said one night as we sat in his glossy black Jeep, the engine still running. "No one marries a waitress." He said it casually, like he was doing me a favor by being honest. I remember staring at the dashboard, trying to figure out if I'd misheard him. But I hadn't. He was looking straight ahead, like the words hadn't wounded anyone, like he hadn't just flicked a match at the foundation I was still struggling to build. We'd been together for 8 months. Long enough to believe in something. Long enough to feel safe dreaming out loud. I told him once, shyly, that I wanted to open a small café someday. A place with real coffee, real music, maybe even a poetry night. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "That's cute." I thought he meant it. Turns out, he thought I was the cute part. Not the dream. Never the dream. He came from a family of fast food royalty. The McHales owned Craver's Grill, a popular fried burger chain with 35 franchises across the Midwest. Landon worked in corporate development, which mostly meant playing golf with investors and throwing around terms like market synergy and brand equity, without ever touching a kitchen or knowing what minimum wage actually felt like. He wore dress shirts with his initials stitched into the cuffs. I wore black non-slip shoes that always smelled faintly of syrup. We lived in the same town, but in completely different worlds. I just didn't realize it until that night. I didn't cry when he said it. I just nodded, quietly opened the door, and stepped out into the cold. I walked the 3 blocks home, past the bakery that always smelled like burnt sugar and the bookstore I'd never had time to browse. My phone buzzed twice, apologies I assumed, but I didn't look. I wasn't sad. I was ignited. Because the thing about people like Landon is, they think ambition only counts if it comes with a suit and stock options. They don't understand what it means to work a double shift, skip lunch, and still show up with a smile. They've never had to build from tips. The next morning, I opened my tiny savings app and stared at the $4,322 I'd scraped together over the last 4 years. Not much, but it was real. Every dollar had a story. A refill. A compliment. A holiday shift I should have spent with family. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to just move on. I was going to move forward. Not to prove anything to Landon. To prove something to myself. I kept working at the diner, but something in me shifted. I paid attention to every system, the POS machine, the food costs, the slow nights, the regulars. I started asking questions. Why were our margins so low on Tuesday nights? Why did people love the soup but skip dessert? The owner, a tired man named Gary, noticed. "You studying business or something?" he asked one afternoon. "Something like that," I said. What I didn't tell him was that every night I came home and watched YouTube videos on restaurant accounting. I read hospitality manuals. I scribbled notes on napkins and created mock menus in Google Docs. Every single night. While Landon was probably out networking at rooftop bars, I was planning floor plans. While he looked for expansion cities, I was sketching chalkboard menus with daily specials. People underestimate a waitress's memory. But we remember everything. Who tips? Who doesn't? Who smiles with kindness? Who smiles with superiority? Who thinks we're just holding place until something better comes along? Landon didn't just dump me. He lit a fuse. And when I finally struck the match, he was going to see just how dangerous a waitress with a dream can become. There's a kind of clarity that comes after heartbreak, like all the static finally goes silent. My shifts at the diner became more than just work. They became research. Every break, every lull between tables, I had my notebook open. Not a frilly pink journal, but a spiral-bound one with food stains and corners bent from being shoved in my apron. It held floor sketches, supplier lists, menu ideas, and cost breakdowns. If someone had stolen it, they could have opened my place themselves. But no one ever looked. Because no one expects the waitress to be building something. I started timing things. How long it took from order to plate. How many people ordered specials over menu staples. How often we sold out of soup before 3 p.m. How many minutes customers waited before getting frustrated. It sounds obsessive, but when you're planning a future no one believes in, you learn to make data your armor. I also watched people, how they moved, what booths they picked, how long they lingered. There was a rhythm to dining most managers missed. I didn't. I was in it. And I was getting sharper every day. One afternoon, I caught Gary, our owner, rubbing his temples behind the counter. "You okay?" I asked, refilling the sugar caddies. "Just numbers," he muttered. "Our lease is coming up, and I'm not sure it's worth renewing." My ears perked. "Wait, you're thinking of selling?" He looked at me, tired eyes squinting. "You interested?" I laughed. "Not unless you accept monthly payments in tips and napkin sketches." He grinned. "Shame. Someone with your work ethic would probably run this place better than I ever did." He said it as a joke, but it landed like a dare. That night, I stayed up past 2 a.m., drafting my first real business plan. It was messy. Half the pages were in pencil. But it had bones. A 30-seat café diner hybrid. Open kitchen concept. Locally sourced seasonal ingredients. A rotating dessert menu. Real coffee. No burnt decaf. I named it Maple and Sage. It felt earthy, comforting, and a little elevated. Exactly what I wanted to build. I started looking into small business loans, grants for women entrepreneurs, and any restaurant mentorships I could find. I joined forums, Facebook groups, even sat in the back of a free workshop at the local college with a hoodie pulled over my hair so no one would ask for ID. Was I scared? Absolutely. I didn't have wealthy parents. I didn't have a safety net. I had a beat-up car and $4,322 in savings. But I had something more dangerous than security. I had clarity. And I had nothing left to lose. I applied for 5 microloans. 3 rejected me outright. 1 ghosted. But the 5th? A woman named Rita Baldwin called me personally. "I read your proposal," she said. "It's raw, but it's real. And you clearly know your stuff." I held my breath. "I want to meet," she said. "In person. No pressure. Just coffee." We met that Friday. She wore thick glasses, red lipstick, and had the kind of voice that made you sit up straighter. After hearing my story and watching me scribble table arrangements on a napkin, she leaned in and said, "I don't invest in numbers. I invest in people. And I like your fire." She handed me her card. $20,000. A loan. Low interest. Grace period. No strings except one. "Keep the name," she said. "Maple and Sage has a heartbeat." I walked home that night with a check in my pocket and a fire in my chest. I wasn't just planning anymore. I was building. Landon once said no one marries a waitress. Maybe he was right. Because some of us aren't looking to be married. Some of us are too busy becoming legends. The first time I held the keys to the old flower shop, I just stood there for a minute. The place was a wreck, dusty tile floors, cracked front window, ceiling fans with more wobble than wind. But when I unlocked that door, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just a building. It was a stage. And I had just taken the lead role. I spent the first week tearing everything down myself, ripping up carpet, scrubbing grout, sanding window frames. I couldn't afford contractors. Just a crowbar, determination, and a Bluetooth speaker blasting indie rock while I worked alone through the night. People walking by would pause and stare. Some even asked if I needed help. But help never came. No one believed I'd pull it off. Which, oddly, helped. Because when no one sees your dream, they can't sabotage it. 2 weeks in, I hired Sasha, a local art school grad who could paint anything you described. She turned one wall into a hand-painted mural of herbs, coffee steam, and floating menus. Another week, and we had thrifted furniture refurbished, booths built from salvaged wood, and second-hand plates sorted by color. Everything was intentional. Every choice meant something. This wasn't just going to be a restaurant. It was going to be mine from blueprint to butter knife. I posted slow updates online. A photo of a painted spoon rack. A close-up of a vintage sugar jar. A sneak peek of the logo, stenciled by hand across the window. Maple and sage. Real food. Real people. Real stories. It started catching attention. Not a lot. Just enough. Enough to reach the wrong ears. One night, while I was reorganizing storage shelves in the back, I heard the bell above the door ring. I peeked out. Landon. Of course, he didn't recognize the space. He'd never walked more than 2 blocks from his gym or favorite cocktail lounge. He stood there awkwardly, dressed in a fitted navy blazer, hands in his pockets like he was doing me a favor by existing. "So, this is what you've been doing," he said. I said nothing. Just stood behind the counter, letting him take in the mural, the tables, the chalkboard menu that read "Opening soon." Maple and sage, he smirked. Sounds like a candle company. I shrugged. It'll smell better than Craver's Grill. He flinched at that. Just a little. Still playing pretend, huh, he said. No, I replied calmly. Now I get paid for it. He looked around, scanning the room like he was trying to find flaws. People don't want fancy toast and poetry with their eggs, he muttered. They want fast, cheap, and familiar. I smiled. Then I'm not their restaurant. He narrowed his eyes. Just don't get too ahead of yourself. Opening is one thing. Staying open is another. Then he turned and walked out. By the next week, rumors had started. Vendors were calling me to double confirm their contracts because someone had told them I was behind on payments. An old coworker texted me asking if I was okay because she'd heard I was out of money and selling the space. Landon. Of course it was him. Men like that don't burn you with fire. They try to smother you with whispers. But the thing about rumors? They die fast. When receipts speak louder. I posted a behind-the-scenes video of our build-out, sped-up footage of walls being painted, shelves going up, me laughing with Sasha and my cousin Marcus as we tested lighting. Overnight, the video got 48,000 views. Comments flooded in. We need this vibe in town. When's the opening? This feels like home already. Landon's whispers got drowned in applause. And I hadn't even served my first dish yet. On opening day, I wrote myself a note on a napkin and taped it under the counter. They didn't believe in your dream. But the oven still turned on. Then I opened the doors. And Maple and Sage was finally alive. We opened on a Tuesday. Not for symbolism, not for flair, but because Tuesdays were slow in this town, and I wanted to give us time to breathe. A quiet start. Space to fail safely if we had to. But failure never showed up. By 11 a.m., the front counter was surrounded by curious locals holding phones and questions. Are you the owner? What's in the maple latte? Do you use real sage in the omelet? I didn't have a fancy PR team or a ribbon-cutting ceremony. What I had was fresh bread, strong coffee, and a front-of-house staff that believed in me the way I wished Landon once had. The first regulars arrived by day 3. A group of older women who brought their own knitting and stayed for 3 hours over mint tea and lemon scones. I gave them their own shelf by the window and a sign that read, Stitch and Sip Society. By the end of the first week, we had a full brunch wait list. Not viral. Not explosive. Just steady. And in this business, steady wins. One afternoon, as I was wiping down menus, Sasha came rushing in from the front. You're not going to believe who just walked in, she whispered. I glanced up. Landon's mother. Her name was Patricia McHale, and she looked like the kind of woman who corrected restaurant staff without making eye contact. Her purse cost more than my rent. She took a seat by the mural, opened the menu, and raised her brows like she expected to be disappointed. I approached slowly. Mrs. McHale. Welcome. She glanced up unimpressed. You're Evelyn, yes? The entrepreneur. The pause before entrepreneur stung, but I didn't show it. That's me. I'll be taking care of you today. She ordered an herbal tea and the rosemary chicken sandwich. I could feel her watching every move I made, like I was a science project that hadn't been tested enough. But when her food came, still hot, with a handwritten note on the plate rim that said, Thank you for visiting us, her expression softened. Just slightly. Halfway through the meal, she called me over again. This bread, she said slowly, where is it from? We bake it in-house, I replied. Every morning. No preservatives. She nodded, chewing more thoughtfully. Then she said something I didn't expect. Landon always said you lacked ambition. That you were just playing pretend. My jaw clenched. But I stayed still. And now? She sipped her tea. Now I think maybe he lacked vision. Then she stood, left a $20 tip, and walked out without another word. Later that week, Sasha showed me a screenshot from a private social media group for local businesswomen. Maple and sage isn't just a vibe, it's a declaration. This is what happens when women stop waiting to be chosen. And below that, a photo of me laughing behind the espresso machine. It had been taken without me noticing, but I didn't hate it. Because for once, I wasn't hiding behind anyone else's name. Our little cafe became a favorite for people who wanted more than fast food. Poets, teachers, nurses, freelancers, people who were tired of being rushed. We started hosting Saturday slow brunches with local musicians playing soft acoustic sets. Every ticket came with a pot of tea and a handwritten menu that changed weekly. We weren't just serving food. We were building community. And the more I saw how people responded, the more I realized. Landon never understood any of this because he never listened. He thought success was measured in numbers, logos, and chain-wide branding. But I knew now. Success smells like baked rosemary, sounds like laughter, and feels like being seen. It started with a voicemail. A clipped, polite message from a man named Alan Schaefer, Craver's Grill district manager for our region. He wanted to discuss a potential collaborative opportunity and asked if I had time to meet regarding future expansion zones. The moment I heard Cravers, my fingers tightened around the phone. I didn't respond. Not out of fear. Out of curiosity. Why would they come to me? 3 days later, the answer walked through my door. Literally. Alan arrived at Maple and Sage with a briefcase and 2 other corporate-looking types in tow. No appointment. Just fake smiles and high-end watches. I met them at the front, arms folded. You're bold, I said. He chuckled. Opportunity requires boldness. I led them to the back corner booth, the one usually reserved for the band on Saturday brunches. No free coffee. No forced politeness. Make it quick, I told him. Alan leaned forward and said, We've been watching her rise. You've built strong local momentum. There's market overlap we could explore. Translation, they were losing customers to me, and now they wanted in. He slid a folder across the table, franchise partnership documents, brand placement options, even a proposal to offer Maple and Sage pastries at Craver's locations as a fresh lifestyle supplement. I read exactly 2 lines. Alan, I said slowly, you do realize who I used to date? He nodded, smile tight. We're aware. But this isn't about Landon. This is about growth. I leaned in, voice low and even. Let me save you time. I don't sell pieces of myself to people who once told me I was nothing. Alan's jaw twitched. I stood. This is a community cafe, not a branding experiment. You want fresh pastries? Start baking. Then I turned and walked away. The fallout came fast. 2 days later, a local food blog leaked a story. Maple and Sage owner rejects franchise giant in stunning power move. The headline was exaggerated, but not wrong. Comments exploded with praise. Finally, someone stands up to the chains. This girl's got backbone. I'm eating there twice this week now. Every table filled. Takeout orders doubled. We ran out of bread by 1 p.m. for 3 days straight. Then came the twist I never saw coming. I got a message from Eli Vargas, a real estate consultant who'd once helped Cravers expand. Cravers is looking to dump one of their underperforming locations. You might want to take a look. He sent the address. It was their first location. The original. The one Landon's grandfather opened in 1984. The one they kept in the family for sentimental branding value. And they were trying to sell it quietly, because the numbers were crashing and they didn't want the board to panic. I drove by that night, parked across the street, and stared at the flickering red neon sign. Craver's Grill number 001. Half the lights were out. The parking lot was nearly empty. For the first time, I didn't see Landon's world as powerful or untouchable. I saw something fragile. Cracking. and maybe available. I called Eli the next morning. What would it take to buy it? He hesitated. They won't sell it to you. Not knowingly. I smiled. So don't tell them. A week later, I had a quiet investor in place, Rita Baldwin, the same woman who gave me my start. A holding company was formed under a neutral name. Documents signed. And on a foggy Wednesday morning, I officially became the silent owner of Craver's Grill number 001. The flagship. The foundation. The pride of their brand. And they didn't even know it yet. Ownership feels different when it's a secret. There's a strange thrill to walking past employees who have no idea you sign their paychecks. It's not about power, it's about presence. It's about knowing you've entered the building through the front door and the back office. Craver's Grill number 001 still looked the same, dated booths, sticky floors, and laminated menus that hadn't changed in a decade. But underneath the worn branding and dwindling foot traffic, it was now mine. And I had a plan. First, observe. I visited 3 times in 2 weeks, blending in with customers. Ordered fries. Took notes. The staff looked tired. One cook was clearly overworked. The manager, a middle-aged man named Donnie, barely acknowledged the front line. I overheard 2 teenage cashiers joking about applying at that fancy café across town. I smiled into my milkshake. Let them talk. Second, document. I pulled sales records, vendor contracts, and payroll details through my holding company's access. What I saw was worse than I expected. Overpriced frozen inventory. Lease payments ballooning. A marketing budget used to print posters that no one read. They were bleeding out. And no one in corporate had a clue. That's the thing about franchises, they're machines. No one looks at the rust until the engine stops. I decided I'd be the one to stop it. Third, restructure. Quietly, I began replacing supply vendors with my maple and sage contacts. Our bakery started delivering buns that were fresher and cheaper. A local farm I'd partnered with got added to the produce list. No one questioned it. After all, the paperwork came from head office. And suddenly, customers started noticing. These fries taste better. When did the burger get this juicy? Landon didn't even blink. Because he still didn't know. Then came the public piece of the puzzle. Rita, ever the strategist, hosted a local food innovation event, a fancy term for a panel discussion mixed with networking and tastings. She asked me to speak. I agreed, but with one condition. Let Landon be invited too. As a panelist. She raised an eyebrow. You sure? I nodded. Absolutely. He'd show up. He never turned down a stage. The night of the event, I arrived in a forest green jumpsuit with gold buttons, no apron, no name tag. Just presence. Landon was already there, sipping something expensive and laughing too loudly. He barely looked at me when we were introduced. I was the last speaker. I walked up to the mic with calm breath and slow steps. The lights dimmed just enough to make the room feel intimate. My name is Evelyn Graves, I began, and I own 2 businesses in this city. One I built from scratch. The other I bought. I let that line sit. I believe in food that tells the truth. Food that remembers where it came from, who made it, and why it matters. People clapped. Landon didn't. After the panel, he found me by the wine table. 2 businesses, huh? He said, voice neutral. I sipped slowly. You'd be surprised what a waitress can afford these days. He narrowed his eyes. So this is your game now? Humble to hero. I smiled politely. No, this is me unwrapping the truth. You're just mad it wasn't gift wrapped for you. That night, as I drove home, I passed the Cravers building. Its lights flickered. The parking lot had a few cars. It wouldn't be mine for long. Because I didn't just want to own Cravers. I wanted to rebuild it. In my image. And when the truth came out, I wanted Landon to realize he never just lost me. He lost everything that could have made him better. You can tell the story of a restaurant through its menu. Craver's Grill had been telling the same story since 1984, frozen patties, processed cheese, and secret sauce that was just mayo and sugar. It was nostalgia wrapped in grease-stained paper. Comfort food, yes, but uninspired, unchanged, and unloved. And now, it was mine. I didn't want to rebrand it publicly. Not yet. Instead, I started tweaking the narrative from inside. Quiet edits. Small upgrades. A better pickle here. Brioche instead of dry buns. A new weekly feature burger that slowly stole the spotlight. Donnie, the manager, didn't ask questions. The sales uptick had silenced his skepticism. He even joked one morning, if this keeps up, we might actually turn a profit this quarter. We both knew we didn't include him. Back at Maple and Sage, business was thriving. I'd hired 2 new servers, a full-time baker, and started offering evening supper club dinners on Thursdays that sold out within hours. We didn't advertise. Word of mouth was our heartbeat. But success wasn't the end game. Not yet. The McHales were. I started hearing whispers about Landon. A few deals falling through. Disagreements with franchisees. And one rumor that made me pause. He's trying to buy out a competing grill chain to prove his relevance to the board. Interesting. He was slipping. Trying to regain power the only way he knew how, by acquisition, not innovation. Meanwhile, I was doing the opposite. No billboards. No flashy logos. Just good food, loyal staff, and one powerful secret. I had already acquired him. The next step was the Menu Summit, an annual internal event Cravers hosted to roll out new items and collect franchise feedback. Normally held in Chicago, this year it was scaled down due to budget streamlining. Lucky for me. The new venue? A boutique hotel 20 minutes from Maple and Sage. Even better? I got an anonymous invite through my holding company's ownership seat. It wasn't just a seat at the table. It was the head of the table. I arrived early, dressed like a consultant, blazer, notebook, neutral makeup. The room was full of managers, chefs, franchise leads. And at the center, standing beneath a banner that read Cravers 2025, Fresh Vision Starts Here, was Landon. He looked polished. Nervous. He launched into a presentation about next-gen menus and elevated guest experience. Lots of buzzwords. No substance. The crowd clapped, but no one was inspired. Then came the open floor session. I raised my hand. Yes, back row, he said, squinting at me. My name is Evelyn. I represent a holding company with recent ownership in store 001. I had a few notes about brand inconsistency and food quality. Landon's jaw tensed. You're Evelyn Graves. I nodded. He blinked. As in, Maple and Sage. Also that, I said. But today I'm just a franchisee. The room murmured. I calmly walked to the front and laid out a short presentation of my own, clean slides, real metrics, photos of smiling customers, positive reviews. Cravers doesn't need reinvention, I said. It needs rediscovery. You've stopped feeding hearts. You only feed mouths. Silence. Then applause. Not wild, but steady. Real. Later, in the hallway, Landon caught up with me. You bought store 001? He asked, breath shallow. I did, I said. 2 months ago. Why? He demanded. Why would you do that? I looked him in the eye. Because no one marries a waitress, right? But apparently, they sell to one. And then I walked away. Because sometimes, the best part of revenge isn't the takeover. It's watching them finally get it. The day after the summit, I walked into Maple and Sage with a kind of stillness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Not pride. Not arrogance. Just certainty. I'd spent so much time being the girl who got underestimated, overlooked, dismissed. Now, I was the woman they had no choice but to respect. But this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about changing the recipe, not just in food, but in how women like me were allowed to rise. The next few weeks blurred together in the best way. Our Thursday supper clubs gained a waitlist stretching 2 months. A local journalist wrote a glowing review titled, "She was a waitress. Now she's a movement." The piece went viral. Not nationwide. Not global. Just enough. Enough to catch the attention of Cravers shareholders. Enough to shake the surface of Landon's illusion of control. Behind the scenes, I kept refining the original Cravers location, quiet renovations, clean signage, updated staff uniforms. I gave the space back its dignity, one booth at a time. But my favorite change? A new burger special. It wasn't fancy, just grass-fed beef, caramelized onions, smoked Gouda, and a homemade aioli on a toasted bun. We named it the Evelyn. No one on staff questioned it. They just smiled and started prepping. When we launched it, I made sure it didn't just taste good. It felt good. We used hand-pressed patties and sourced the Gouda from a local dairy co-op. The buns were brioche, delivered daily from the same bakery that supplied maple and sage. I slipped in one note on the chalkboard menu below the description. Inspired by the woman who believed flavor is a form of power. By week 2, it became the store's best-selling item. And then, one morning, as I was double-checking invoices in the back office, Donnie stepped in with an odd look. "There's someone asking to speak with the owner." I set down my pen. "Who is it?" He hesitated. "Patricia McHale." My smile didn't even twitch. "Send her in." She entered wearing a black pantsuit, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Her presence filled the room even before she spoke. "So it's true," she said. "You bought this place." I nodded. 6 months ago. She looked around, taking in the subtle changes, the cleaner tile, the brighter lighting, the neatly dressed staff. "And that burger," she added, pointing to the chalkboard. "That's you. That's me." She crossed her arms. "Do you know how many years my husband built this brand? How much it cost us to hold it together?" "Yes," I said softly. "And I know how fast your son nearly ran it into the ground." Her jaw tightened. "This is personal for you." It was, I admitted. But not anymore. Now it's business. "I'm just doing what your family forgot how to do, feed people with care." There was a long pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. "My husband would have liked you." Then she left. That night, as I closed the register, I pulled the receipts for the day. We'd hit a new record. But more than the numbers, it was the names on the orders that hit me. Teachers, nurses, college kids, construction workers, the people I once served with aching feet and fake smiles. The ones who never asked what I planned to do next. The ones who believed the food mattered. And now, they were choosing my place over a chain. Because they saw themselves in the girl who made it. As I turned off the lights, I paused beside the chalkboard one last time and traced the lettering of my name. The Evelyn. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like a recipe rewritten. One where I didn't just change the flavor. I changed the ending. A week after Patricia's visit, a letter arrived, not an email, not a phone call. An embossed envelope with a Cravers Holdings seal. The kind that looked like it was reserved for legal threats or invitations to events where champagne had its own budget. Inside, a formal notice. You are invited to attend the upcoming shareholders review and strategic planning session. I stared at it, then folded it neatly and slid it into my drawer next to old copies of vendor receipts and the napkin that bore my first floor plan sketch. They'd finally realized who was sitting at the table. The meeting was held at a downtown conference center, glass walls, filtered water, not a trace of grease or real food in sight. I arrived early, in a deep plum blazer and sleek trousers. Hair pinned back. No smile, no apron, no trace of the waitress they once dismissed. There were 15 board members. 12 men. 2 women. 1 empty seat. Mine. I walked in like I belonged there, because now I did. The meeting began with Landon presenting quarterly numbers. He looked polished but pale. Revenue was down across 8 stores. 2 had closed. And customer retention in heritage locations had dropped nearly 22%. No mention of why. No mention of me. He clicked through slides with buzzwords, expansion pipeline, brand refresh, competitive leverage. But I saw the cracks. And so did they. When it was my turn, I didn't walk to the podium. I stayed seated, calm, grounded. "I'd like to offer a counter perspective," I began. "As the current operator of Store 001, the original Craver site, I've spent the last 6 months testing changes." I passed around folders. Inside, weekly sales increases, customer feedback, side-by-side images of the store then and now, menu comparisons. And, finally, a 1-page proposal for phased modernization across struggling locations. I paused. No rebranding. No franchises bought out. No slogans. Just better food, better wages, and respect for the people who actually eat here. The room was quiet. Then one of the older board members leaned forward. "You made that burger?" "The Evelyn." I nodded. "My grandson made me try it. Said it was the first thing Cravers ever served that didn't taste like cardboard." Laughter rippled softly around the table. Another board member, a woman with sharp eyes, asked, "What's your endgame, Ms. Graves?" I smiled. "My endgame is simple. Keep the stores alive. Make them matter again." She tapped her folder. "Would you be willing to advise broader operations?" I looked at Landon. His face was frozen. "I'd consider it," I said, "if we start from a place of truth." After the meeting, Landon followed me into the hallway. "You made your point," he said bitterly. "No, Landon," I replied, turning to face him. "I made my place." He shook his head. "You could have just moved on. Done your little cafe thing. Why come for this?" I leaned in slightly. "Because you told me I was just a waitress." And instead of arguing, I became an owner. Back at Maple and Sage that night, Sasha greeted me with a grin. "How'd it go?" I just handed her the letter the board sent me on the way out. She read the first line aloud. "We invite Evelyn Graves to serve as strategic consultant for Heritage Store Revitalization, effective immediately." She hooped. Then she hugged me like we were still kids sneaking into concerts. And for a moment, I felt it. Not revenge, not victory, but vindication. Not for what I'd proven to Landon, but for what I'd never needed from him to begin with. 3 months after the board meeting, my inbox began to change. What used to be invoices and supply updates was now flooded with words like integration proposal, brand repositioning, and executive consultation alignment. Corporate speak for one thing, they were listening to me now. Cravers Holdings had formally appointed me as a strategic advisor for their Heritage Revitalization Initiative, and every idea I had suggested, from menu simplification to local supplier sourcing, was quietly being rolled out store by store. And Landon? He'd been reassigned. That's what the board called it in their polite memo. But everyone in the company knew. He'd been pushed out. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post a single word online. No victory photo. No told you so interview. Instead, I went to work. I started by inviting managers from the oldest Cravers locations to Maple and Sage for an all-day workshop. We cooked together. We tested sauces. We sat in circles and talked about real service, what it meant, how it had gotten lost. There were no suits, no lanyards, no branded coffee cups. Just people who remembered why they started. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered, half distracted. "Evelyn," the voice said. "It's Patricia." I paused. "Mrs. McHale." "I heard what you've done," she said quietly. "The board respects you. The employees adore you. Even the stores are profitable again." I waited, unsure where this was going. She sighed. "I won't ask you to forgive my son. But I'd like to say thank you for not humiliating us when you had every right to." That caught me off guard. "I didn't do it for revenge," I said. "I did it because someone had to care about this place again." She exhaled. "He's moved to Arizona. I don't think he'll come back." I said nothing. Patricia added, "If my husband were alive, he would have offered you his chair." And then she hung up. That evening, I walked through Cravers Grill number 001, my store, just before closing. The staff was wiping down tables. Music played low. One couple lingered over milkshakes, hands clasped across the table. A teenage girl sat near the window, writing in a spiral notebook, just like I once did. I approached her gently. "Need anything?" She looked up surprised. "Oh, I'm good, thanks. I just like writing here." "Working on something?" "Yeah," she smiled shyly. "Business ideas." I smiled too. "Keep going. You never know where a notebook will take you." When I returned to Maple and Sage, Sasha was counting the tips. "You look like someone just finished a marathon," she joked. "In a way," I said. "I think I did." We sat in the quiet for a while. She broke the silence. "You think he regrets it?" I didn't have to ask who she meant. I looked out the window at the line of lights glowing along the street. Shops. Families. People choosing to spend their time and money on places that felt real. He'll regret not seeing what I was building, I finally said. But I don't need that anymore. Because the truth was, Landon hadn't just lost me. He'd lost the future, and all because he couldn't imagine a waitress becoming a woman who ran empires. It took Landon exactly 6 months to go from being next in line to being a footnote. By the time the Cravers board issued their annual statement, his name had been quietly removed from the leadership directory. No tribute. No transition speech. Just a line in small print. Former VP of Brand Strategy, role concluded Q3. He hadn't just been reassigned. He'd been erased. And still, I never said a word. Because while he once delivered his insults like facts, I delivered my revenge like silence. But the world has a way of circling back. One evening, while closing up at Maple and Sage, Sasha walked in holding her phone out. You're gonna want to see this. It was a video taken on someone's phone in a Phoenix airport. Landon, in a wrinkled button-down shirt, arguing with a flight attendant at a budget airline gate. I paid for priority boarding. Sir, please calm down. Do you know who I am? The clip was already making rounds on local gossip pages. The comments were brutal. Guess priority doesn't include dignity. That's what happens when mommy and daddy's franchise dries up. Didn't he used to run something? Yikes. I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. I just watched it once, then turned off the screen. Because I wasn't the same woman who once sat in his car, swallowing disappointment when he told me no one would marry a waitress. That woman had outgrown him, outpaced him, outlasted him. Still, part of me needed to finish what I'd started. Not to hurt him, but to close the loop. So I wrote a letter. A real one. Ink on paper. It read, Landon, you were right once. I wasn't CEO material. But that's because I never wanted to be a CEO. I wanted to be someone who mattered. And now I am, without your permission, your last name, or your approval. You taught me something valuable, though. That some people lead with entitlement, while others build quietly until they don't need to ask for space. They just own it. You may never understand what that feels like. And that's okay. I'm not writing for closure. I'm writing to say, I've finally found peace in places you never thought to look. Evelyn. I never mailed it. But I didn't need to. Because writing it made it real. The fall of Landon wasn't loud. It wasn't a scandal. It was gradual, invisible, like dust gathering on a forgotten nameplate. His family no longer held control. His title was gone. And the girl he'd once dismissed as just a waitress now shaped the very menus he used to sign off on. One afternoon, I stood behind the counter of Maple and Sage watching a couple split a pecan tart. The woman leaned forward, laughing softly at something her husband said. He brushed a crumb from her cheek, and they just sat there. Present. Unbothered. No boardroom. No status games. Just love, the kind that makes space for dreams. And I thought, that's what Landon never understood. Real value isn't built in corner offices. It's built in quiet booths, in long hours, in choosing kindness over clout. That night, I wrote a new quote on our chalkboard menu. The most powerful woman in the room is usually the one who's been underestimated the longest. I didn't sign it. I didn't have to. Everyone knew whose hand had written those words. The second anniversary of Maple and Sage arrived with little fanfare, just the way I wanted it. No streamers. No banners. Just a soft thank you chalked onto the welcome board, a few fresh peonies on each table, and a special dinner menu titled, The Roots Collection. Every dish that night was tied to memory. The herb-roasted chicken I used to make with my mom on Sunday nights. The buttermilk pancakes I flipped on my first solo shift as a server. And a dessert I called Bittersweet Closure dark chocolate tart with sea salt and candied citrus. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Especially not me. We were fully booked for the evening. There was a comfort in watching it all unfold, napkins being folded, coffee cups clinking, my staff moving like quiet choreography. This place, once a whisper in a notebook, had become a sanctuary for people like me, those who knew what it was like to be overlooked, and those still finding their voice. That night, I did something I hadn't done in a while. I sat down at table 3, the one by the window with the best light, and watched. Not as the boss. But as the girl who once worked doubles, skipped meals, and believed that her dreams had to wait, Sasha brought over a glass of wine and a small plate of rosemary crackers. "No clipboard tonight?" she teased. Just observing, I smiled. She slid into the chair across from me, exhaled, and looked around. "Do you realize what you've built?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "I do now. Landon ever try to reach out?" "Once," I said. "An email. No subject line. Just one sentence." She leaned forward. "What did it say?" "I didn't see it then. I see it now. And I deleted it." She laughed. "Cold." "No," I said. "Warm." Because it meant I didn't need it anymore. Later that evening, a young woman approached the counter. She was maybe 22, in an oversized coat, eyes tired but curious. "Hi," she said nervously. "I don't mean to bother you. I heard your story. About the franchise. About everything. I just wanted to say, it gives me hope." Her voice cracked slightly at the end. I stood from my stool and walked around to meet her. "What's your name?" "Lily," she whispered. I looked her in the eye. "You don't need anyone to see your worth before you act on it. Let them catch up later." She blinked back a tear and nodded. And I knew the torch had passed. The next morning, I opened the cafe alone, like I used to. Just me and the sunrise. I ground the beans, started the first pot of coffee, and flipped the sign on the door to open. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. Because every part of this journey, from being underestimated to becoming unstoppable, was written in these small, quiet moments. The takeover didn't come with headlines or handshakes. It came with heat from the oven, ink-stained fingers, and a kind of grace you can't fake. And maybe, just maybe, being a waitress had never been something to outgrow. Maybe it was the very reason I knew how to build something from the ground up. Maybe it wasn't about proving them wrong. Maybe it was always about proving myself right. Her name was Evelyn Graves. She didn't marry into power. She baked it, one table at a time, until every seat was hers.